In a small, unassuming diner on Elm Street, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of crispy bacon. The establishment, run by the warm-hearted Sarah, was a haven for locals seeking comfort food and friendly faces. The diner was nothing extravagant, just checkered tablecloths and wooden booths, filled with the hum of conversation and laughter. It was the kind of place where time seemed to slow down, and the world outside faded away. Among the regulars was a peculiar figure, a 97-year-old war veteran named Arthur Blake, who dined alone every day without fail. Arthur was a fixture at the diner, arriving promptly at 8:30 a.m. clad in a well-worn military jacket, its fabric faded but the creases crisp. His polished shoes had seen better days, but they still gleamed in the morning light. He always sat at the same booth in the far corner, facing the window, and ordered the same meal: meatloaf, mashed potatoes without gravy, cornbread, and a steaming cup of black coffee. His routine was so predictable that Sarah could almost set her watch by it. But what intrigued Sarah was not just Arthur's daily ritual, it was the way he carried himself. He never seemed truly alone. His posture suggested he was in conversation with someone invisible, and sometimes his lips would move in quiet whispers, as if recounting stories only he could hear. At first, Sarah dismissed it as the habits of an old man reminiscing about days gone by. However, as the weeks turned into months, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something deeper lay beneath the surface. Arthur's presence was a mix of strength and fragility, with deep lines etched into his weathered face that told tales of a life well lived, yet haunted by shadows. Each day, he meticulously cut his meatloaf into perfect squares, savoring each bite as if it were a memory he was reliving. The other patrons rarely spoke to him, respecting his solitude, but Sarah often caught glimpses of the sorrow in his eyes. One rainy October morning, the diner was unusually quiet as thunder rumbled ominously outside. Arthur arrived, soaked and weary, his coat clinging to his frail frame. The rain drummed against the windows, creating a cozy atmosphere inside, but Sarah felt an unusual heaviness in the air. Today felt different. With a surge of courage, she approached his table, coffee pot in hand. "Mr. Blake," she began, "can I get you anything else today?" Arthur looked up, his pale blue eyes scanning her face as if searching for something. After a long pause, he replied, "Do you know what today is?" Sarah frowned, her mind racing. It was just another Thursday in the fall. "No, I don't." With a heavy sigh, Arthur gestured to the empty seat across from him. "Would you like to sit down?" Surprised but intrigued, Sarah accepted the invitation. As she settled into the booth, the air grew thick with unspoken words. Arthur took a sip of his coffee, his gaze distant. 75 years ago today, my best friend died in my arms." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. She listened intently as Arthur recounted the harrowing day he lost his friend, Michael Thompson, during the war. They had been young, barely out of their teens, filled with bravado and dreams. The memories spilled out, painting a vivid picture of their time in the trenches, the gunfire, the screams, and the moment Michael had been struck down. It was a cold morning, just like today, Arthur recalled, his voice trembling. "We had been in the trenches for weeks, no sleep, no warm food. Just the sound of chaos all around us. Michael was always the brave one, always cracking jokes to keep our spirits up. He made me promise something before he died. He said to eat one meal for him every day, to make sure he was never forgotten." Sarah felt her heart ache for the old man. This wasn't just a meal, it was a promise etched in grief and love. Arthur's silence spoke volumes about the burden he carried, and she realized that each meal was a tribute not just to Michael, but to all the friends he had lost in that dark chapter of his life. Just then, the door swung open, and a man in a sharp suit strode in, his eyes scanning the diner until they fell on Arthur. The tension in the air shifted palpably. Arthur stiffened, his hands gripping the edge of the table, knuckles turning white. Well, if it isn't Sergeant Blake," the man said with a smirk that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. "Who are you?" Arthur replied, his voice tense, the defiance of a soldier still lingering in him. "I'm just someone looking for the truth," the man said, taking a step closer. "And I think it's time we talked." As they exchanged words, Sarah's heart raced. She sensed that this was no ordinary encounter. The man placed a document on the table, and Arthur's expression darkened as he recognized it. The man continued, revealing that they believed Arthur had been part of something much larger than he realized. "7 of you went in, and only 1 of you came out," the man said, his tone grave. "What happened to the others, Arthur?" "They died," Arthur whispered, his voice heavy with sorrow. "I thought I was the only one left." But the man smirked, sensing the crack in Arthur's facade. "You weren't just a casualty. You were marked for something bigger. We think there was a traitor in your unit." Sarah's heart raced as she listened, piecing together the fragments of Arthur's past. This was no isolated incident, it was a conspiracy that had followed him through the years. The man pressed on, revealing that they believed Michael's death had been orchestrated by someone within their ranks, someone who had set them up to fail. Arthur's fists clenched, and Sarah could see the pain etched on his face. "Leonard Mason," he said finally, the name slipping through his lips like a curse. "He was our commanding officer." The man in the suit nodded, taking note of Arthur's reaction. "We need to find him. He might hold the key to everything." Determined, Arthur rose from his seat, a fire ignited within him. "Let's finish what was started all those years ago." As they left the diner, Sarah felt a mix of fear and admiration for the old soldier. Arthur wasn't just a man living in the past, he was a warrior ready to confront the demons that had haunted him for decades. Together with the investigator, they delved into records, searching for any trace of Mason. Days turned into weeks as they pieced together the puzzle, and Arthur discovered that the man who had betrayed him had a son, Richard, who might also be in danger. The 3 of them set out to find Richard, hoping he could help them uncover the truth. When they reached Richard's law office, the air was thick with tension. Richard, upon seeing Arthur, recognized him instantly. "I know who you are," he said, his voice steady. Arthur's heart raced. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Richard handed him a journal that belonged to his father. As Arthur flipped through the pages, his breath caught in his throat. Michael had known about Mason's treachery. The revelation spiraled into a whirlwind of emotions. Arthur learned that Mason had been a double agent, leaking secrets and orchestrating betrayals to protect his own interests. And now, as they dug deeper, they uncovered the truth that had been buried for too long. Months passed, and finally, they tracked down Mason, now living under an alias in Spain. The day of his arrest marked a turning point for Arthur. No longer haunted by guilt, he finally felt that he was reclaiming his life. In the weeks that followed, Arthur returned to the diner, where Sarah greeted him with a warm smile and a familiar plate of meatloaf. This time, however, the meal felt different. It was no longer a reminder of loss, it was a celebration of resilience and friendship. As they raised their glasses, Arthur spoke, "To those we lost and to the battles still fought." And for the first time in years, the weight of guilt lifted, replaced by the taste of freedom and the warmth of memories shared. But the journey didn't end there. Arthur found himself compelled to share his story with others. He began to visit local schools and community centers, speaking about the sacrifices made in war, the importance of remembrance, and the true meaning of friendship. His presence became a beacon of hope for many, and Sarah watched as he transformed from a lonely old man into a respected figure in the community. With each story he shared, Arthur felt the burden of the past lighten, as if he were honoring not just Michael and his fallen comrades, but also himself. One day, as Arthur was preparing for another speaking engagement, he received an unexpected letter. It was from Richard, who had been researching further into his father's past. The letter revealed that they had uncovered more about Mason's dealings, and that there were still lingering questions about the extent of his betrayal. Arthur's heart raced as he read the letter. He realized that the journey for truth was far from over. He reached out to Richard, and together they delved deeper into the shadows of the past. This time, they were determined to ensure that the names of the fallen would not only be remembered but honored, and that the truth would finally be laid to rest. As Arthur stepped back into the diner, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had fought many battles in his life, but now he was ready to take on a new one. With the support of Sarah, Richard, and the community that had embraced him, Arthur Blake was no longer just a veteran, he was a voice for the silenced and a champion for the truth. And in that cozy diner on Elm Street, as the rain poured outside, Arthur smiled, knowing that he was not just eating for the past but for a future where stories would be shared, and legacies would be honored. The diner, once a place of solitude, had become a gathering space for hope, healing, and remembrance.